Welcome to Chapter 3, Lesson 2, or Lesson 1, Part 2, where we're going to work with that same file that we did from Part 1, which is your last name, comma, first name, setup. So go ahead and open up that file for me. It should be on your H drive. Pause if you need to, but once you have it open, what you're going to do is we're going to work with our text boxes and then also change the color of our guides, margins, and columns. So the first thing that I want you to do is take your selection tool, and you're going to click and drag on that text box that's on the top and put it in your second column so that it lines up, and you see those smart guides, how they turn green when I have them lined up, and release so that we have a text box on our far right column and then a text box on our middle column. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go to Edit, and then we're going to go to our Preferences, and then we are going to select our Guides and Pasteboard. This is where we can change the colors of our different guides. So now I want you to select the Columns list arrow, and we're going to change that to light gray. And then we're going to select the Margins list arrow, which is above it, and we're going to change that to light gray as well. Then we're going to click OK. So now we're going to use the selection tool and click on the vertical guide to select it. So remember, our vertical guide is the one that runs up and down right here. It's that light blue. And then we're going to hold down the Shift key and select all of our other guides. So we should have all 4 guides selected, and they should look dark blue right now. But then once we click our layout and then ruler guides, we're going to be able to change the color of those. And we want to change the color of those to red and then hit OK. So then when we click anywhere else in the artboard, we deselect those guides and they're now shown in red. Now what we're going to do is make sure that our guides in the back box is not checked. So we need to go back to Edit, go to Preferences, go to Guides and Pasteboard, and then make sure that this box is not checked because we want our guides to show through as we're putting things on top of them. So verify that the guides in the back box is unchecked and then hit OK. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create color tint frames on a master page. So we're going to verify first off that the fill and stroke color are both set to none. So right now it looks like mine might be set to black, so I need to make sure that I set this to 1. So I can go to the swatches panel, and then I just click none, and then I can minimize this again, making sure that both now my fill and my stroke are set to none. So now we're going to go to our rectangle tool, which is right near the middle of our tools, and we're going to select that or hit M. And then we're going to drag a small rectangle anywhere above the 2 text frames in the rightmost column. So remember, we made 2 text frames down here, and it says we're going to do it above both of the text frames. So we're going to click and drag and just release it. And then we need to go to our selection tool so that we can adjust the sizing and location of this particular rectangle. So what we're going to do is we are going to grab the left handle of the frame until it will snap into place with our left guide, which is that vertical one, that red one. So we're going to click on that edge and we're going to drag, and then you'll notice it turns that thick dark blue once we have it aligned with that particular guide. So then we're going to drag the right hand so that it is in line with the end of the document. And then we are going to drag the top handle of the frame so that it snaps with the top edge of the document. And then we're going to adjust the height of our box using our control panel up here. So this is our control panel, and if we want to change the height, that is H, and we want to change our height to 1.35. And when we hit enter, what's going to happen is this is going to adjust the height from the top up. So we can also adjust the location of this by, again, clicking and dragging. And now once we have it aligned with the top, by clicking and dragging it up and making sure that our height is still that 1.35, we're going to change the color of our box. So we can either come down here to our fill and make it active so that it's in front, or if we hit X, it will rotate between the two, and as you can see, whichever one is just barely on top is the one that's going to be active. So we want to make sure that our fill is active. And we're going to come over to our swatches panel, and we're going to select yellow. And now you'll see that that changes the color of our box to yellow. And it's very important that you can still see those guides in the front, as we're going to be lining different things up. So now we're going to drag a copy of the yellow frame to the bottom of the page. And remember, to do that, we're going to hold down Shift and Alt, making sure we're on our selection tool, and then clicking and dragging down. And then we're going to line it up right with the bottom edge of that page, and then release our keys and our mouse. So then we're going to drag the top edge of the bottom frame down so that it aligns with the bottommost of the three guides. So you can see right now it aligns with the middle one. So if we take our selection tool, and we're going to drag it down so that it aligns with that bottommost line. And then we're going to click and drag our bottom left point on this box all the way over to the bottom of or to the far left-hand side of our document, and then make sure it stays aligned with the bottom. So now we're going to open up our swatches panel, which is just coming over to our panels and clicking on swatches, and we're going to want to create a new rectangle that is going to be the color blue. So we want to make sure that we don't have this one selected, so meaning we need to click anywhere on our artboard and deselect everything, and then just make sure that our fill is active and select that light blue. So the only change that you should see is that light blue changing in your fill and your tools. So then what we can do is we can go to the rectangle tool. We'll click M on our keyboard. Remember, hover over, we can select M. Then we're going to click and drag and just draw a small blue rectangle. So now in your control panel, if you hover over this little grid, I want you to make sure that your reference point is selected on that top left reference point. So now that when we go and we try and adjust these features for our rectangle, it's going to be referring to an adjustment on our y-axis for the top left-hand corner of our screen. So we're going to type 0 and X, and then hit Tab. And then we are going to select 0 and Y as well, and hit Tab again. And then we're going to change our width to 8.35. And then we're going to change our height to 3.4. So your document should look like this, where you only have one open white space within the document and then just a little sliver in between these two boxes. Let's go ahead and save your work as we move on to learn how to use the line tool. So your line tool can be found right underneath your text tool. You can also use the backslash key. So before we start working with our line tool, let's either go to Edit and then deselect all, or just click anywhere on your pasteboard so that none of your squares are selected. As we start to change the colors, it won't affect them. So we want to go to our fill color, and we want to make sure that our fill is selected and none in our swatches. And then select our stroke color and make sure that our stroke is black. So now we want to position our cursor on the left edge of the document. And then we're going to press and hold Shift while we click and drag our line across our document. So let's go ahead and actually minimize our swatch panel so we can see our whole document. And then we're going to click just anywhere on the left side of the board, but we're going to hold down Shift and then click and drag. And what that does is no matter where I move my cursor up or down, it's going to maintain a straight line that we would be creating. So now you should have a black line across your document. I want to enter in a stroke weight of 4, and we can find that up here at the top of the control panel, and it's going to be this one right here. And we're going to click on the drop down arrow and hit 4, or just enter in 4 in the box, and you'll know you have the right panel when your line is now thicker. And then the next thing we're going to do is we're going to type 0 in the X box and then 3.5 in the Y. So 0 is probably already going to be in the X box if you started on the edge. And then we're going to change this to 3.5 and hit enter. So now we have a line that goes across the top of our yellow boxes. And then if you want, you can double check and make sure that the length is 12.5, which is going to be the entire length of the document. And then we're going to learn how to use our transform again function. So we're going to click on our rectangle tool, and we are going to draw a small rectangle in the first column anywhere in the bottom section of the page. So just clicking and dragging, and drawing ourselves a small rectangle down here. Now we're going to click the top left reference point, so up here in our control panel, making sure that our reference point of top left is selected. And then we're going to type 0 in the X box. And then we're going to type 3.6 in the Y text box. And then we're going to type a width of 1.8. And then you can hit tab and type in a height of 1. Now we're going to press I on our keyboard to go to our eyedropper tool, and you'll notice that down here, if we hover over it, our eyedropper tool is now active. And we're just going to select anywhere in the blue area so that our fill will now be the same as the blue boxes above. So now we're going to make a copy of this. So we want to make sure we're on our selection tool by clicking V on our keyboard or hitting our selection tool. We're going to hold down Shift and Alt, and then we're just going to click and drag over. And we're going to try and separate that by about 1/8 inch. If it's a little more or a little less, that's okay. But the purpose is to use our transform function. So before you click anything else, make sure you haven't done any steps in between. You're going to go to Object, Transform again, and then hit Transform again. And it's going to create another box the same distance from the one I just created. Let's go ahead and do that until we have 5 boxes total. And then we're going to do it one more time, transform again, and now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 boxes. So now what we're going to do is we are going to learn how to center this in the middle of our image or our pages without having to go through a ton of different steps. So making sure our selection tool is on, we're going to hold down the Shift key and select all 5 of our boxes. And then up in our control panel, we are going to select the center reference point. So once we have our center reference point selected, now we can change the location on our x-axis, and it's going to work towards the center and not 6.5 inches over. It's going to take it from the center of our selected images rather than putting the edge of those selected images at the center. So we're going to type in 6.5 and then hit enter, or 6.25, sorry, because that is half of 12.5, and then hit enter. And so now, typically what would happen if we were selected on a left reference point or a right is that the left-hand side or the right-hand side of our selected items would start at 6.5. But since we have it from the center, we're going to have it lined up in the center. So your reference point is basically the reference point of where in your image you're going to have things aligned. And that is it for Chapter 3, Lesson 1, Part 2. You will need this document as we work through the rest of Chapter 3, so please just save it on your H drive and then continue on to the next video lecture of Chapter 3, Lesson 2.